All right, so now it is my pleasure to introduce our next conversation, nailing the tech internship hunt as a Hakka-Canadian person. Jacqueline is on a mission to empower her community to implement technologies to optimize processes and raise awareness around social issues. Her curiosity and drive for innovation support societal change collaboratively. Jacqueline is an advocate for sustainability, mental health, and diversity in the STEM fields. Welcome, Jacqueline. Now, moderating this conversation, let's give a big welcome back to the stage, Hunter Canning, who is a virtual event host here at Power to Fly. Hunter is also an artist who has a passion for bringing people together to foster growth, kindness, and a true understanding of each other. Please take it away. Thank you for being here, both of you.
Thank you, Mariella, and thank you, Jacqueline, for making the time today. I'm really looking forward to jumping in and hearing about your experience and tips on helping others finding and landing great internships. And before we jump in, I'm wondering if you could share a bit about maybe for a little bit of your own story of your first internship and maybe any challenges you encountered during that as a Hakka-Canadian person. Was there things that were specifically challenging based off of that part of your identity? And also, if you could maybe help educate me and the audience a little bit and tell us a little bit about what it is to be a Hakka-Canadian person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Hunter, for moderating. So I guess just to give a little bit more context into what a Hakka person is. So for me, like growing up as like a Chinese person, like the Hakka community is more of like a very old like Chinese like dialect and culture. So nowadays we have more like Mandarin and like Cantonese, but Hakka like was here for like thousands and thousands of years, and my parents and ancestors like were all Hakka. So they originated in this little town called Moyen in China, and there they had like I guess just built up the culture there. And personally, I don't know too much about the whole like history of what Hakka people did, but because of the communism that happened in around the like 1900s, this led a lot of my relatives to move out of China and go to like Europe, like Jamaica, the US, Canada. And so that's where like India. So my grandparents actually moved to India and Bangladesh respectively. And then from there, my parents then moved to Canada so they can like start a new life. And so I think growing up with immigrant parents definitely made it having a lot of those like challenges of like the generation gap of like there's that identity of me being like Hakka and you know growing up with very like I guess diverse background of not really understanding like oh I'm like Chinese or you know or do I like I also have some of that like the background from like India and like Bangladesh and kind of like fusing all of that cultures together sometimes was definitely like confusing just growing up and trying to explain people that like no I'm just Chinese like that's all I am. It's just I was just my parents were born in different places. And so I think that definitely affected like how I viewed my identity. And then I think the other challenges like growing up was kind of like initially I was growing up in Scarborough, which is more predominantly like South Asian communities. So I was one of like the only like East Asian people there. And then afterward, I started growing up in more of like the Markham and like Richmond Hill area, where it's more predominantly like East Asian. So it definitely was like an interesting shift to go from like those different cultures and trying to figure out like who I am as a person and not trying to get stuck with those like stereotypes of like, oh, do you play piano or do you go for like these math classes? Like, and that I guess the quote of like model minority kind of getting built into you, whether it's like consciously or unconsciously. So I think there's just a lot of that stereotypes built into our culture, but we haven't really had a lot of those conversations until I think for me, like more recently because of the pandemic and just seeing all the like different violences like against East Asian people and Pacific Islanders. So yeah, that's a little bit about what Hakka people are and how I perceive my culture so far.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's really powerful to hear. And I imagine I really resonated for me when you were sharing about the confusion of identity and trying to figure out what it meant for you versus what it meant to be perceived in that way, and other people, what it meant for other people. You mentioned stereotypes in there, and I imagine it must be an ongoing journey of this discovery of identity, whether that be with, race or other parts of yourself. And so I'm curious if you could share about, as we're going to be talking about internships, what is that? What was it like for you getting your first internship? What were some of the challenges and pitfalls maybe that you experienced coming at you? And maybe you could talk about also what it was like from the inside for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when I first started my journey in like just getting like jobs, I like before I even got into like university, I was like working at like McDonald's and like my local library. So those were a lot more just like, oh, just going up to them and just asking for a job. And I felt like that was a lot simpler than what you kind of go through when you're trying to find like internships. And so when I entered university, I was initially studying for computer science because I was passionate about like technology and trying to build products around that. And I did it for around like a year. And then because I was a part of the co-op program at my university, we were able to have this opportunity to have like a job portal where it lists out like all the different like companies that were hiring and like around like how many roles that they have. And it was a very like relatively like simple process just to apply. So they gave you like a limit of like 50 jobs to apply for. And then if you didn't get anything through that round, you would go into the next round. It was around like 250 applications. So for me, I was able to get like a few interviews from that, and the process was simplified in a way that like all I had to give was like my resume, maybe a cover letter, my transcripts, and then they have all this other information about me, about like what courses I'm taking. And because I was going to the school with this co-op program, it just made the vetting system a lot easier. So the company I did end up getting an offer from was OpenText. So I was working as a quality assurance specialist. So I was focused on like testing softwares for their enterprise applications, both mobile and website. And I think after working there for 4 months, like I realized it wasn't something I really wanted to do. And I think what made it challenging overall, so starting more with like the recruitment process, I felt like being a part of a co-op program made it a lot simpler than I think if you were just finding a role on your own, which I can also explain like later on, because that's what I did predominantly after this experience. And then I think what made it challenging is just more because after doing all the application process, the most challenging part was the interview process. So I've had experiences with like doing it for clubs or, extracurricular activities, but this one was more about like, okay, what type of like programming languages can you give us examples of like the side projects you've done? But because it was my very first like co-op placement, I felt like they weren't too strict about like having like coding like challenges or anything like that. It was more of like a qualitative sense of like showing my skills. So I think it was more about being confident in my experiences and being able to articulate that in a way that sounded like I knew what I was saying, basically. And being able to be a sponge and learn and be coachable to them. So I think those are the main parts that I found when trying to like look for my first job. And then the challenges like actually within the role, I think at least in the company that like in the branch that I was in, it was mostly predominantly like I was one of like the only like East Asian woman. And there's this one moment that I was one of like the only woman in the room sometimes for certain meetings because I was more in like the IT team, and I that's just the nature of the field. But I think it would have been great to see like more women or just more diversity in terms of like ethnicities or backgrounds, or to kind of feel like I'm more included in the conversation, or to feel like my voice is heard in some sense.
Yeah, but here at Power to Fly, we do like to talk about, being the only one in the room sometimes, and how that can affect a person's performance, their mental health, and ways to overcome that, and or to work through it, right? Because you said it's unfortunately very normal in a lot of the fields for people to experience that.
Yeah.
Were there things that helped you in those instances? Did you feel like you had resources or things that you were able to do for yourself, or maybe you were provided for by the people you worked with? Are there any good experiences that came or that got you through that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, at least maybe at the time, I wasn't really aware of, the different biases or the feeling that I was having, like imposter syndrome. Like, I feel like for women in tech, or like people in tech, or people like underrepresented groups in tech, they tend to put that word around a lot. But I think I didn't resonate with it too much at the time because I didn't know what it meant for me. So I personally didn't really explore like the support systems that we had in that particular company. But I think like later on, once I started getting more experiences with different companies and like understanding like what diversity means to me, like why it's so important to have those different voices in the workplace, I was able to branch out and like work with groups like Women in Computer Science, and working with other like rewriting the code, where they have like a fellowship for women in technology. So I think for me, like I had to find it more within myself rather than I guess relying too much on the company. I think companies definitely need to do that. But I think it's also being proactive and trying to explore that for yourself, and finding groups that meet your identity or your parts of your intersectionality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of being proactive, so we're talking about your experience as an intern to now you have your own company that you founded called International Hub. Can you share with us what International Hub's all about and what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So me and my friend Deborah, so she and I met her through like rewriting actually we met through Technovation, which is another like group that empowers like groups of young women to build like their own mobile applications. And so because of that, like we started like actually when I transferred over into another university doing like business technology management, and she was doing like computer science, we kind of just started becoming like more friends, and we realized we were a lot of like in the same groups together, like rewriting the code. And so I think that really helped us like build that connection. And then during the pandemic, we found that a lot of students were like having issues with finding like internships, and even I like got one of my internships like canceled during like the summer of like 2020. So I just felt like it was definitely like it can be very frustrating, especially if it's like your first or your second like internship, and then now you don't have it anymore, and they don't really have, not everyone has that like foundation to get a job. So when we were conducting like our user research in the beginning, we were trying to figure out like which groups of students were struggling the most. And that's why we concluded with having to support like international students with their career readiness and just trying to prepare them for like the workplace, and getting internships. And we created like a centralized database and an online community that helped like international students through having like building content for them, creating like some events through like partnerships, and then also just sharing any tips that we had from our own like personal experiences. So we felt that that was like a way for us to provide like them some opportunities that we collected, but also providing them like a good like community, so that they can ask questions and be open with that. And but now that we're more focused on the user research part of it and trying to understand like what are their specific needs, from not just like a content, like what types of things that they want to hear, but also how can we actually like support them and get more employers to be a part of that conversation.
Wow, that sounds like a really valuable tool that's you're making available. And I love that it came out of your experience that there was a lack of this, so you made it.
Yeah.
And you're gifting that to others and helping other people with it, and
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Can you speak to, so you saw, I was like, okay, well, this is something missing, and then you're filling this void, and that came out of your personal experience. Can you also share about maybe how your feelings and your relationship to your identity and your relationship to that, how those experiences and those continual experiences affected you starting the company, and maybe how they have changed, evolved, grow as you continue forward with this company?
Yeah, so I think I would say that in terms of how it definitely affected when I was starting out, I think being like in like under an underrepresented group had some like effect on, I think, more unconscious. So there's no like outright like, oh, like you're not getting, like we're not going to support you, or we're not going to like fund you for that. So, but I think there has been a lot of those like statistics where it's like, oh, it's just a lot harder for like women or like non-binary people to not be able to get those resources that they need, or people who are people of color. It's definitely like a lot harder for them. And I think it's hard to quantify that, I would say, just based on my own experiences. But I think I really try to like use my identity as a way to empathize with people, because with international students, they come from like all over the world, and it can be a very like diverse like community. So I think I want to use that as more of just like showing them like, okay, like maybe I don't have the exact experience that you have, but I understand, what it's like to be like a minority within like within Canada, or just within like a specific country, and how to actually like navigate that, without having any like foundation can be like very difficult. So I think I tried to turn into that perspective. And then I think the other thing is, trying to be a part of those like support groups that like women in like entrepreneurship. There was one of the groups that we were part of, like one of those like incubators was like a female founder like project, where they like supported like women entrepreneurs on their endeavors. And I think that really helped just to have like kind of like a safe space to talk about some of the challenges that you're having, whether or not like it's because you're a woman, but just I think it just made it feel like we had a place to talk about it if there was that commonality. And I feel like there will always be challenges being in an underrepresented group and going through like whether it's like business, technology, entrepreneurship. So I think it's more about how you like try to respond to it, and again like just being more proactive and finding those opportunities or groups that can support you. And then if you feel like there's something is wrong, like if you feel like you are being discriminated because of your identity, then standing up for yourself and making sure that they don't try to silence you or take away opportunities just because there's just things you can't help about yourself. So yeah, I think that's what I learned from like starting International Hub.
Wow. And I'm very curious, so you've made this over the past couple of years. We've been remote for the past couple of years. Things are going back into person, but can you talk about what a remote internship looks like? Because, in my mind, the classic intern is like, yeah, they're getting to learn things, but then they're like running errands, right? And just doing things that really have nothing to do with what they hope to do, but they have to do it anyway. So what does that look like when you're doing that from a laptop at your house or wherever you are?
Yeah, for sure. Like I would say that like the past 2 years when the pandemic first started, I think recruitment felt harder just because it was such a big transition. And so like you had to go to a lot of like virtual like recruitment events and just like network with people on LinkedIn or email. And I think if you're not used to it, you can quickly like burn out from that. And then once you actually, go through the process, it's like, everything's on like Zoom or on Teams. And then you go through like multiple stages of like doing like a online interview and then an online like test or assessment of your skills. And then once you actually land into the internship, I think navigating that is more, I think it's not too bad because I feel like at least for people who grow up with technology, they understand like how everything works. I think it's more about adjusting to not seeing anyone and being accountable for yourself. So it's a lot of more like self-motivation, self-accountability so that you're not, getting tired and you just like nap like half the day or something because, your boss or your other team members are not watching. I think the other things that I've noticed, like even within myself a lot is just like burnout and like Zoom fatigue or just like meeting fatigue because you're online all the time. Like if you get like a ping on one of your chats, it's like you feel like you have to respond to it right away. Or if you're just waiting to hear from your emails just in case your like boss like gives you like a meeting or sends you like a meeting invite. So I think, or like even being on meetings, you feel like you're being observed. So I think like psychologically, you're thinking like, okay, I need to like be presentable, like I need to look good, and that. But like when you're in person, it feels like it's not top of mind as much. At least that's my experience. So I think the lessons I've taken away from that is just trying to like manage your schedule. Like one of the tips that I got is like, if you have like a half an hour meeting, like don't book a back-to-back meeting, like have like a half an hour buffer to like process what you learned and what the takeaways were. And then also just having more of like a mental break. And then afterward, then you can start booking. So like kind of doing like half an hour like meeting, half an hour break, or like 1 hour meeting, half an hour break, just so that you have that time. And then I think the other thing that I learned is trying to compartmentalize where you're working. So like, let's say you're working like in your like house, like try not to put your laptop and your computer like in your bedroom, because then you feel like you can't escape and you'll every time you go into bed, like you'll just have that stress like within you like when you're trying to sleep. So I think it's just trying to manage like your energy, manage your time, like make sure that you divide your work and like your personal life. And it's definitely something that I want to keep like getting better at.
Yeah, that is incredibly important. I think I identify with that too. I have being remote, I move around the house where I work, but now I've kind of settled in this other room. I actually don't really work in my office anymore because now that I spent so much time there, I'm like, oh, it's actually, I don't like it over there. I like it where all my living room, where my plants are, and I've made my bedroom actually like there's nothing in it other than like the things that help me sleep. And I keep it completely sparse so that my brain, like you said, when I go in that room, it knows we're not working anymore. We are resting. We are recharging that body. We are practicing self-care, which is very important, And I love that you were talking about like these tips, like we we're just talking about, like what we can do for ourselves at home. And I think these are great universal tips. Could you maybe speak to what API folks with those identities who are looking for the right internship, what tips can you give these folks for maybe seeking internships and advice for them, for these people?
Yeah, for sure. So I would think it honestly is like very similar to like this is I feel like it's universal tips for everyone. And I can go like further into like I guess specifics about nuances for people who are in that group. And so I think main thing is I feel like I preach this a lot about just being proactive because just because you're looking for a job now or you're not looking for a job now, it's always still good to network. It's always good to build that network because you never know where it might go. Like there's some people that I've been in contact with for the past like 3 or like 6 years, and whether it's through like jobs or just through like networking events, like and then they can refer to me to like other people to talk to. So I think just cultivating that relationship is really important because it's good to like have that continuous like, oh, this is what I'm doing, like now I'm working at like Microsoft, or now I'm going to be working at like BlackRock, and it just shows that like you want to network and you want to build that relationship with them, but you also are kind of letting them know like this is what I'm up to, and then you're always like top of mind. I think the other tip that I have is making sure that you're very specific when you're talking about to people about like what you want to do. I think it's good to just be straightforward about if you're looking for an opportunity or what you're trying to get out of the conversation. So not being like, oh, like please give me a job kind of thing, but like it's more about like this is what I am looking for. I'm looking like for me, like for example, like, oh, I'm looking for a product manager role or a data analytics role within like the social innovation space. Like, is this something that you can help me out with? Or do you have any contacts within this space? I think just being open with that and straightforward is really important. But I think in addition to that is also trying to understand like what they're trying to look for, like asking them like, what do you think makes someone successful in this type of role? Like, what is your culture like? And like, see if there's actually like that alignment rather than just trying to find like any job. I think the other thing is always just trying to present yourself in the way that you want people to perceive you. Like I know a lot of people talk about like personal branding and things like that, but like of course you want to in a sense like be professional, but I also think it's important more just to be authentic and not put too much pressure and trying to like post all the time, or like if your content's not like viral, like I really feel like it doesn't matter that much. I think it's just more about being yourself and what's important to you. Like some people, they really like doing content based like platforms, and so like me, like I'm more of just like I passionate more about like sustainability or mental health and diversity. So like I would just try to take more like action, like volunteering and things like that. Everyone's kind of different. So I think just take the approach that's most authentic to you, and use that when you're having conversations with people, and people will see that passion through you. And then lastly, like if you are part of like the API group, it's really just recognizing like what potential challenges there are, like imposter syndrome, unconscious biases will happen. It's just knowing like which companies are more diverse, and there's so many platforms like Power to Fly that advertise companies that are diverse, and there's also like rewriting the code, or like women in like technology, women in business. Like there's so many groups that have organizations that are focused on diversity. So try to look for those type of groups that give you those types of opportunities, and promote groups that or organizations that you would want to work for.
Oh, fantastic. Jacqueline, thank you so much for this. We're out of time. I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate everything. We're going to drop in the chat how to stay connected to Jacqueline. There's all these different ways that you can connect with them. And I really appreciate you making the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much again, Hunter. And yeah, if anyone is interested in talking to me more, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. Okay, have a good day.